Have you ever wondered why mental health is such a critical concern in the architecture profession at the moment? Join us for part 2 of my conversation with architect Doug Hodgson. Doug shares his thoughts on what to do if you're feeling overwhelmed or close to burnout, and what his practice new works have been doing to safeguard their team's mental health. Catch it all on this episode of Architecture Business Club, the weekly podcast for solo and small firm architecture practice owners just like you who want to build a profitable, future-proof architecture business that fits around their life. I'm John Clayton, your host. If you're a small practice leader or sole practitioner in architecture, struggling to find clarity or reach your goals, consider working with me. I offer personalised one-to-one support through coaching, consulting and mentoring. This tailored approach helps you navigate your unique path to success. Whether it's growing your practice, working fewer hours, or building your team, I've got you covered. Just click the link in the show notes to book a call with me to discuss your options, or email John, that's Jon, at architecturebusinessclub.com for more information. Now let's continue the conversation with Doug about mental health. We were talking there about overwhelm, and we've talked about a few ideas there about how people can set their practice up in such a way to try and minimize that and avoid it from happening. But for those people that might be listening that are already feeling overwhelmed or even feeling close to burnout from the work that they're doing, what can we do about it? Do you have any thoughts on that if somebody's listening and they're already feeling really overwhelmed with the work that they're doing?
Yeah, and it's a tricky one because obviously Tom and I closed one company to set up another one, and most professionals aren't in that space, the ability to do that. So I'd say that the most important thing is to be kind to yourself, and that is, I often find actually it's a link to physical health. Mental health has a link to physical health. So be able to sort of step back if you can and go somewhere different. So I often find, as we spoke about earlier, connection to nature is incredibly important. So we just moved, actually, our new studio is here in Bermondsey, and we've stumbled across Southwark Park, which I weirdly hadn't been to before. It's absolutely stunning. And there are these moments of nature, of green space all over the city in London and all over the country, of course. I'd say is that take the time to go out into nature during the day, so don't, if you need to take some time off work, talk to people in the practice about it. We need to talk to each other more about our mental health. And if you need to take a morning off to go and walk like through the park, or if you're down and you live in Brighton, you need to go to the South Downs, and just, I'd hope that responsible employers would say, no, that's fine. That's a mental health half day off or a day off. And it's not a holiday. It's to enable you to be better when you come back to work the following day. It is, if we need to treat it more like that, it's as though you've got a cold or flu or whatever. You as an employer would give them time off to do that. It wouldn't be sneered at. It wouldn't be counted as being a problem. It's just that you just need that moment, that breath to do that.
I hope that most employers would be understanding of that. And I know that, from my own experience, I've had times when I've felt overwhelmed with things, or I've felt really stressed. And particularly when there's a lot on my to-do list. And sometimes I'm getting better at becoming self-aware of when this happens. And I know that there's things that I can do and it isn't just, oh, well, the thing you have to do is you just have to work a longer day. You've got to cram in more hours. You've got to get to the end of that to-do list. We never get to the end of the to-do list. But actually, I've had times when I might have been working on a particular task one afternoon, and it just feels like I'm wading through treacle. It's so difficult, and it's taking so long. But then if I walk away from it and have an early finish, have a restful evening, come back to it the next day, I can get the same task done in a fraction of the time because I've had time to recharge my batteries. Or another thing that I like to do is, I think even during the day, just having a short period of time out away from my desk, if I start to feel that way, sometimes I'll go out and just go, you know what, at lunchtime, I'm not gonna sit at my desk or sit at home. I work from home, so I know this is a little bit different if you work in an office, but if you work in an office environment, go out, walk, take a walk to a nearby park or something. Just get out in nature. Even just doing that for half an hour can have a really good impact on how you're feeling that day. Definitely.
Yeah, there's a lot of research around being surrounded by nature, surrounded by green. Got a lot of plants here in the new studio. That it does. We got to remember we're humans, we're animals effectively, and we like being out and surrounded by nature. And I think that often, as most of us are city dwellers, I think in the profession, probably most of us are urban based, we can forget that. And I think that this is one of the things where, we're super aware of, is actually as designers, we are designing places where people live and where they work. And the spaces between are as important as the buildings themselves. And it's a lot of our current clients really recognize that. And it's about, I think as a profession, we kind of need to not forget that we also need to sort of live the lives that we are designing for, if that makes sense. It was one of the other things around the sort of mental health of the profession more generally is, do we, as individual architects, have the ability to, on the current sort of fee structures and pay structures, ever be able to afford to own the same houses that we're often asked to design for others, live in those same environments that we're creating? And I think for young graduates and I see that as being a real problem in the future for this. The housing crisis is fundamental to architects, because in two really quite serious ways. One is obviously that we as a profession need to be better at designing homes more generally, and that sort of was what we're involved with down in Lewis, for instance, at the Phoenix project. But our young architects need to be able to feel that they can one day live in one of these spaces that they're designing. And I fear that too much of London's sort of creative energy is focused on high net worth individuals from all around the world that just seem to gravitate here or be encouraged to be here, and then effectively abuse the young sort of creatives that are here. And that has a huge impact on the mental health of young professionals who are sort of asking the question, why is this client spending £400 on a toilet brush when that's a quarter of my salary or something per month, and it's a real, there's an issue there. I think that I'd like to see more from the RIBA, especially. But whatever the ARB do, but the RIBA saying, especially through their awards program and through the way in which they promote architecture and talk about architecture, I think there needs to be far more focus on affordable housing, far less focus on expensive houses or expensive endeavors. That, who are they for? How many people are they actually for? And I think that it is quite sad. I think that the Sterling shortlist this year is so bereft of really a lot of really good new housing, which I was quite shocked by, I think. And actually over the last couple of years, and if you go to the sort of the House of the Year competition, like, what are we celebrating as a profession? I would like to just qualify that by saying that I think more should be celebrated, not less. And there is space for incredible design everywhere. But I do fear that there is too much concentration on the sort of of our profession on these high net worth individuals that exist within the city.
Yeah, and I mean, when we look at the population as a whole, that's such a minority of the general population. And as you say, we have a housing crisis, and to have celebration of good design on more everyday properties, more everyday projects that's actually accessible for most people, affordable homes as well. And that would be good to see, because as you say that, I mean, it must be frustrating for a lot of architects and designers that they are spending their days working on designs for properties that are such high value that it must be just feel like a pipe dream to ever have the opportunity for them to live in a home that they have like designed themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'd like to think that, you know, with the new targets of the 1.5 million new homes that are going to be needed within 5 years' time for Labour to get re-elected, there needs to be a focus from the profession to be involved in that, and not only involved, to lead it, because it would be such a shame if we just got a whole swathe of noddy houses knocked up by Taylor Wimpey across the country that had absolutely no relevance to any kind of local condition or anything. And what is the design life of those anyway? You know, so, and what are they made out of? Profession needs to really grasp this, and some people are being vocal about it, like Jay Morton, for example, at Bell Phillips. I think she's doing an amazing job on it. This needs to be at the forefront of the discourse, and I would like to see the RIBA on the Channel 4 news saying, we want to be involved in this. You know, where are they? Why isn't RIBA needs to be out there, really sort of saying that this is the focus of the profession for the next 5 years. And all those multi-million pound houses can be put on pause. They'll still be there if necessary in a few years' time. And I think that would encourage these big house builders to maybe engage the profession better, to pay the profession better, but also that they can't have the excuse of, oh, well, you know what, it's too difficult. It's too difficult to come up with all these different designs. Let's just knock out stuff that we're just used to doing. If you need 1.5 million, then we just have to do what we've always done. I think just carrying on the way that we've always carried on, I don't think is an acceptable answer for the profession. We shouldn't take it as an acceptable answer.
No, not at all. Just swinging back to mental health and well-being, prevention's always going to be better than cure, isn't it? Could we talk a little bit more about what you've tried at New Works to safeguard your team's mental health and well-being?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think absolute core of it needs to be, we need to be true to ourselves. And then for me, that's about being your authentic self. And I'm now openly gay in the construction industry. And as I feel confident to do that at this point in my career, I haven't always felt that. I've often felt that I was sort of coming out on a regular basis to various people. And there are some sort of horror stories of the reactions that would entail. But mostly it was people who were very, very kind. But I think that we need to call out other people's behaviors and languages, when people are in those moments, and, to safeguard others' well-being as well as our own. But I think that one of the things that, we do at New Works, which is different to what we used to do, is we completely restructured, our working day. So, the first hour of the day, if you like, so 9 till 10, is given over to physical well-being. So everyone, an activity they do, either going running or going to the gym or swimming, cycling, long walk to work. You know, there's the space is given over to that physical well-being in the morning. And that enables you then to do the sort of the second part, which is 10 till 2, which is then this deep creative work, where there's no emails, there's no phone calls, there's no WhatsApp, limited access to the internet, purely for research basis, but no distractions from blogs, podcasts, or anything else, which is sort of taking away from the focus of of what you're doing, what that creative endeavor is. After that, the afternoon is then open for collaboration. So that's meetings with other consultants, with clients. So that's 2 till 5, and emails, of course, during that period. And then the hour, if you like, thereafter, 5 till 6, is for your mental health. So maybe you want to learn a new language, or you want to go and meet some friends that are just that little bit further away. You can get there. Or you want to do something which is very personal to you, go to a gallery or something. And so that gives you the space that, or just go and meet, just go home, and spend some time with the family, as I do, having a young 3-year-old son who requires my attention. So, it's about structuring the day to really focus on the creative work in that morning, which is why did architecture anyway, and what our clients are paying for. It's about, for us, sort of informing our clients and keeping them and letting them buy into this way of working through saying that this is why you want us to work on your project. So, help us carve out this space. And once you get through a few of the jokes of clients going, "Oh, I promise I won't interrupt your meditation," or "I promise I won't I won't call you after 5 o'clock," because need to spend time with the family. They then really do start to see the fruits of it as well. We've really noticed that we're far more efficient in the way we work. We're producing far more. And I think that it is actually a structure to the working day, which I really hope others start to adopt.
I love it. It sounds like a fantastic way to structure the day. Doug, what advice would you give to other practice owners to safeguard their mental health? Would you give some similar advice to them? Remember, don't forget to download the Architecture Business Blueprint, the step-by-step formula to freedom for architects, architectural technologists and architectural designers. You can grab the blueprint without any charge at architecturebusinessclub.com/blueprint. And if you're enjoying this episode, then please leave a 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Now back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. The first and foremost is stay connected to the work. So don't stop drawing. And we stopped drawing for a while. We were doing markups, but that's not the same thing. I mean, it's we're to actually get back into the drawing. There was the sort of the happiest and quite a pivotal moment the last year or so was I sort of sat down for 2 days and drew a street elevation for a project, and by hand, and knowing that on the 3rd day we'd be presenting it to the client. So it's a little bit high pressure, but very, very enjoyable. And I just didn't do anything other than that. I know this is rather sort of self-indulgent, possibly, but turned off emails and shut down everything else. And it was this wonderful thing. It was a really enjoyable experience working with Tom. Tom would come along, we'd draw something, and then we effectively had this sort of this drawing which had all these sort of flaps of, I'll see if I can find it, but and the client was mesmerized, and they sat there and they were just their nose got closer and closer and closer to the drawing as mine did while I was drawing it, and sort of realized I need a proper drawing board. But it's that sort of don't lose the connection to the actual work and why you're doing it. So that would be my biggest piece of advice to practice owners. The other would be minimize emails. Treat them as letters, really. Don't engage in the tit for tat. And that I feel that the more that we treat them as letters, others respond similarly. And especially since we don't respond to emails in the morning, others are really starting to sort of treat us with it's a little bit more care in the way in which they structure a question or a request. They realize there's a finite amount of time that they have for that response to be sort of organized. So it's about respecting other people's time, I think more generally. And that's sort of being kinder to others and and it gets reciprocated back, I think, by others when they sort of realize what it is that you're doing with your day. and that you're not a filing cabinet, and you're not a sort of an AI bot who can just respond to any sort of question in the moment. So yeah, and I'd say that all the other thing would be to trust others more. So whether it's external consultants, bookkeeping, accounting, all the obvious ones, but publicity, HR, IT, it can go on, and then that should go on to being delivery practice, creative practice. I'd just like to say that I think I'd love to encourage more really good delivery architects who maybe feel undervalued in their current situation to step out and set up their own practice, because we'd love to collaborate with them. I think that they should feel more empowered and more celebrated within the profession. And then if they become business owners and they take in their working methods and their sort of more structured possible way of working, trying to emulate Veritech's confidence in those work stages, then we would love to work with them. So obviously we'd hope that they would share our values on a working day and the way they treat their employees as well.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. I'd like to give a shout out actually to the humble chartered architectural technologists out there, because I think that they could potentially make a great delivery partner for many design-focused architects' practices. I would love to see more cross-collaboration between professions within the industry at a sort of membership, with amongst members, but also at a sort of organisational level as well. I think that organisations like the RIBA and CIAT, CIOB, they could do a better job of coordinating things together, and I think their members would get a lot more value from that collaboration across those different bodies. I think at the moment that people are often in these different silos, and actually, if we all work together a bit more collaboratively, I think we could achieve some better results. I think. Again, we could probably do definitely a whole episode on that story for another day, perhaps.
We should.
Yeah. So, are there any other steps that you think we could all take to improve mental health across the industry as a whole?
I think it's really sort of similar to what we were talking before, and that's about collaborating more, specializing, and respecting each other's skill sets. And I think that if we haven't, and I think as you were just saying, if the architectural technologists, and I think that if there's a way in which I think the RIBA needs to be more responsible here. They need to be more sort of realizing this is an important part of their role is to sort of facilitate those kind of relationships and be more supportive of practices. I think, one of the, going back to the Bartlett again, but when we left the Bartlett, you're just sort of chucked out into the wider world and they ignore you for years unless you're successful. The Bartlett only came back to us like 10 years later after we were in the 40 under 40. And then suddenly there was all arms open, like, oh, you're great. And we're like, where have you been for like the last 15 years? And they're discarded into the wilderness. And I think that the RIBA have a similar position. I think they need to be far more progressive in what they do. And I think that they need to be more inclusive and representative, and they need to be really pushing an agenda for more diversity within the profession. And I think that as a wider industry, mental health in a wider industry, the only way in which the industry is going to, I believe, survive, our profession within the industry is going to survive really in the long term, is to become more diverse and be more effective with communities and to be more supportive of the individuals that are working on the projects. I think the industry needs to be more respectful of what architects provide to the whole design team, the project team, and therefore remunerated and correctly in comparison to all the other people within the industry. And as a profession, we need to be more respectful of the individuals within and provide hope and routes for young people from more diverse backgrounds to be able to access the profession. Otherwise, we will become an irrelevance. I think as a group, as a profession, unless we can restructure education to be more reflective of that. And I think that requires a completely reset on part one and part two and part three, where there's far less years required in full-time education. I think there's the LSA model is a really good one, but I still think that the whole thing can be shortened, at least to achieving a level of part two after 4 years. You don't need to keep repeating years. Like third year is a repeat of second year. Fourth and fifth year are pretty much repeats of third year. So if you can have maybe 2 years in education full time and then a year out in practice, I suggest 6 months in creative, 6 months in delivery, then back to education full time for effectively your fourth year in the process. And then after that fourth year, that's your part two. Then into profession and working towards like a seventh, eighth year when you're then you've gained enough experience to be taking a part three to become a professional. So I don't think that we're endangering the general public through casting these too young, inexperienced architects. I'd say that they would be more experienced. They'd have more opportunity to learn from practice, but with a much less outlay and debt burden being put on young people. And also, actually, just to add, I think that year in the middle, that sandwiched year, should be organised by the RIBA. It should be a responsibility of the RIBA to make it a requirement of chartered practices that they take on these part ones, and so that you have a guaranteed job and income during that third year, and so that you can enter the education with the knowledge that you can get to the end of it and afford it. And I think it's absolutely astonishing that part ones are expected to try and find their own job. I mean, it's at the whim of employers. Again, it's the basis that we were talking about earlier on with the education system being broken. But it shouldn't be like that, and they shouldn't have to be negotiating their own pay or having to work unpaid in some places when it's really part of the education. So. Yeah, I think there needs to be more support for young people.
Doug, what would be the main thing that you'd like everyone to take away from the conversation?
I think the main thing is that architecture is important, and but it's not so important that we need to kill young architects in the process. And I think that we need to be kinder to ourselves as the more senior people within the profession as well, but we also need to be kinder throughout. So I think there's an over requirement on young people in the profession, I think, to take a lot of the heavy burden. And I think that without being mentally and physically healthy, I think that the profession will suffer and we will become more under the pressure of others within the industry who are very large and powerful and well financially supported. So, if we can be more agile, collaborate more, talk to one another more within the profession, I think that will be for the betterment of everyone within the profession, and thereby also the betterment of architecture in this country. And I think we'll have better buildings, we'll have more sustainable buildings, and hopefully we'll be more engaged in the housing crisis and how that is resolved. Because out of it, we'll have more practices working across large projects where we're specializing in the design, and then others who maybe the big builders can have more faith in can be delivering at the other end. I think that's what I'd like to take away.
That would be good to see. Doug, is there anything else that you wanted to say that we haven't covered?
I thought we covered quite a lot. I think possibly just around the planning system. Now, this is obviously currently under review, and which is good to see, but I fear that unless the profession gets more involved in the conversation, we're not going to be able to enact the change that's required, which is around improving the quality of the buildings that are being these mass housing going to be building over the next 5 years. So we need to be far more within that, and we need the reset of that. I think that there's a lot should be done with communities. Communities should be involved in architecture, and we should be respectful of communities, but we should engage with communities. And I think having sort of CICs and other organizations or CLTs where the actual profession is then responding to the requirements is going to be a much more fruitful way in the long term of achieving these large numbers of houses that we do need to build. But I just think they need to be respectful of local conditions.
Absolutely. Doug, this has been a really great conversation. It's been great to have the opportunity to talk to you about this. I do have one other question, and it's not related. Well, I suppose it kind of loosely is related to well-being, because I love to travel and discover new places and get out and about. And I just wondered if you could tell me about one of your favourite places and what you love about it.
I was definitely connected to well-being. I think that everyone needs a sort of a stabilizing place, I feel. And currently that stabilizing place for me is spending time with my son, who we adopted a year and a half ago, in our garden. Because at the end of the garden, there's a fence, and then there's a field, and then there's a really long view beyond. And it's just a really wonderful space where sort of we have that connection to nature, but we have to spend time together. And which is why we sort of catch the sun every now and again. But it's a wonderful space. And I think that the other thing is about favorite places. I think often our mental health, we need somewhere that we can go to sort of in our sort of our mind. And mine for me is my grandma's house in Somerset, where I spent a lot of time. I was often shipped off to Somerset weeks on end, and I spent an awful lot of time gardening with her in her garden. So I remember that very vividly. And at Christmas time, we'd then bring in most of the garden inside, and we'd sort of chop down the holly tree and bring it in and completely cover the house in greenery. So I feel that a lot of my sort of want to be outside and gardening and sort of allotmenting comes from that relationship with my grandma. And so, yeah, I think that those sort of spaces is what I feel most connected to.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Yeah. I love getting out I'd love going out into the garden and into the woods and into nature. I'm a terrible gardener, though. I will readily admit that. My wife is the one that's the green-fingered member of our household, so she tends to tends to the plants and the flowers and things. Which actually reminds me, she's away for a couple of days and she wanted me to water her plants, and I've actually forgotten to do it. So I'll be in trouble if I don't go and do that today. So Doug, thank you so much again for coming on the show. Really appreciate you sharing and talking about this really important topic with me. If people want to connect with you online, where's the best place for them to do that?
Probably through LinkedIn. I think I'm trying to be better on that now. I know my business partner Tom is far more sort of linked in than I am. But that's a really good space. We're also on Instagram and as New Works, and or email us studio@newworks with a hyphen.net. And we'd love to hear from you, especially if you're a delivery practice, or we'd like to collaborate on any projects.
That's brilliant. And Doug, do you want to remind everyone of your website address again, please?
Yes. So we are www.newworks with a hyphen in the middle .net.
Got it. Perfect. Thanks again, Doug.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. Have a great day.
Next time, I chat with Fabio Zammit about how you can generate more leads from your website. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Architecture Business Club. If you liked this episode, think other people might enjoy it, or just want to show your support for the show, then please leave a glowing 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean so much to me and makes it easier for new listeners to discover the show. And if you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode. If you want to connect with me, you can do that on most social media platforms. Just search for @Mr. John Clayton. The best place to connect with me online, though, is on LinkedIn. You can find a link to my profile in the show notes. Remember, running your architecture business doesn't have to be hard, and you don't need to do it alone. This is Architecture Business Club.